From castle kitchens to grand feasts, medieval knights had a surprising connection to massive burgers. Today we're diving into ancient cookbooks and castle records to uncover how these warriors created their legendary 5-pound feasts. When knights returned from battle, the castle would burst into a frenzy of celebration. These weren't just simple dinners, they were spectacular events that could last for days. The great hall would be decorated with colorful banners, while servants prepared countless dishes. The feast would start with a parade of exotic foods, peacocks decorated with their own feathers, whole roasted pigs, and massive meat pies big enough to feed 20 people. Musicians played lively tunes while jesters entertained the crowd. The knight who led the victory would sit at the high table, closest to the lord, where they'd get first pick of the finest dishes. These feasts weren't just about eating. They were a way to show off wealth, build friendships, and celebrate success. Everyone from nobles to common soldiers joined in, sharing stories of their adventures between bites of roasted meats and sweet treats. Let's peek into a remarkable discovery, a dusty cookbook found hidden in an old castle wall. Written by Thomas de Westerburg, the royal chef of England's Windsor Castle, this treasure gives us amazing details about medieval cooking. The book shows that castle chefs were creative problem solvers who could feed hundreds of people without modern tools. They used clever tricks like marking bread with different symbols to show which table it belonged to, and had special hand signals to coordinate the kitchen staff over the noise. The recipes reveal surprising ingredients, exotic spices from far-off lands, fresh herbs from the castle gardens, and even gold leaf for decorating special dishes. But what's really fascinating is how detailed the portion sizes were. One recipe calls for exactly enough meat to feed 40 knights and 20 squires. These medieval master chefs weren't just cooking, they were running massive food operations that would impress even today's top restaurants. The medieval kitchen had clever ways to keep meat fresh without refrigerators. Salt was the superstar of preservation. Castle workers would pack huge cuts of meat in thick layers of salt, which pulled out moisture and stopped bacteria from growing. But they didn't just use plain salt. They mixed in herbs like rosemary and thyme, which not only added flavor, but also helped keep the meat good longer. For big celebrations, knights liked their meat seasoned with expensive spices from distant lands, pepper, cinnamon, and even saffron. They believed these spices showed their wealth and made the meat healthier to eat. Castle butchers had special rooms called salt houses, where they hung massive cuts of meat, sometimes for weeks until they were perfectly preserved. When it was time to cook, they'd soak the meat in wine or ale to remove extra salt and add more flavor. The medieval baker's day started long before sunrise, with massive stone ovens being fired up to reach the perfect temperature. These weren't your regular burger buns. Castle bakers made huge, round loaves that could be a foot across. They used special wheat called manchet flour, which made bread whiter and softer than the dark, heavy bread common people ate. The castle bakers had a secret technique. They'd add egg yolks and butter to make the bread rich and golden, perfect for soaking up meat juices. Each giant bun was scored with special marks showing which noble family it was for, and the best ones were brushed with honey and milk to give them a beautiful shine. The castle ovens were so big they could bake 100 loaves at once, and timing was crucial. Too long in the oven meant burnt bread, too little meant doughy centers. Behind every castle's walls was a special garden that helped create those amazing medieval flavors. Castle gardeners grew a mix of herbs we still use today, like sage and thyme, alongside some forgotten medieval favorites. Peppermint was super popular. Knights believed it gave them energy for battle. They also grew something called knight's cress, a spicy plant that added kick to their meat. The castle's head gardener knew exactly when to pick each herb, mourning for the strongest flavors, and only on dry days to prevent mold. These fresh herbs were mixed with salt and rubbed into the meat hours before cooking. What made castle burgers really special was a blend called King's Seasoning, a secret mix of 9 different herbs that only royal gardeners knew how to grow and combine perfectly. Medieval knights needed huge amounts of food to maintain their strength, and there was good reason for those massive portions. A typical knight burned through around 6,000 calories daily, about 3 times what we eat today. Their heavy armor alone weighed up to 65 pounds, and just walking around in it was like carrying a modern backpack filled with bricks. Training sessions were brutal, often lasting from sunrise to sunset. Knights would practice sword fighting, horse riding and wrestling, all while wearing that heavy armor. The castle cooks understood this and made sure to serve protein-rich foods like beef, pork, and game meat in large quantities. They believed certain foods gave special strengths: beef for power, pork for endurance, and fish for quick thinking. Even during peaceful times, knights kept up these big meals to stay ready for battle. Their eating habits were actually pretty smart. They loaded up on proteins and fats, which gave them lasting energy for their demanding lifestyle. The castle kitchen was a marvel of medieval engineering, with massive stone ovens that could reach scorching temperatures. These weren't simple cooking spots, they were carefully designed with different heat zones. The main oven, called the Great Hearth, was big enough to roast an entire cow. Cooks used clever tricks to control the heat, like moving food closer to or further from the flames using long iron hooks. They also had special rotating spits that turned automatically using weighted pulley systems, ensuring even cooking. For those giant burger patties, they used a technique called gradual heating, starting the meat far from the flames and slowly moving it closer. The kitchen staff had to master the art of reading the fire's heat by holding their hands near the flames and counting seconds, a skill that took years to perfect. In medieval times, the size of your meal showed how important you were. The bigger the portion, the more power you had. Lords and ladies always got the largest servings, especially of prized meats like venison and wild boar. A knight's plate would be piled high with food, not just for nutrition, but to show their rank. The lowest servants might only get thin soup and bread, while a celebrated knight could expect thick slices of meat, rich sauces, and fancy side dishes. Even the type of bread you got mattered. Knights ate soft white bread made from the finest flour, while peasants had rough brown bread. At feasts, the most honored guests sat closest to the lord and got served first. The size of your portion wasn't just about being hungry. It was a clear message about your place in society. Now, let's explore how to make a burger fit for a medieval knight. Start with 5 pounds of freshly ground beef. The medieval way would mix meat from different parts of the cow for the best flavor. Shape it into a massive round patty about 3 inches thick. The secret is in the seasoning, a blend of salt, pepper, fresh herbs like sage and thyme, and a splash of ale, just as castle cooks did. Cook it slowly over medium heat, giving it time to cook evenly through the center. Medieval cooks would have used a large iron plate over hot coals, turning the meat carefully with long-handled tools. The massive bun needs to be sturdy enough to hold all that meat. Think of a loaf nearly as big as a shield. Top it with classic medieval additions like caramelized onions and aged cheese, similar to what castle cooks used for special feasts. Looking at burgers today versus medieval times shows some fascinating differences and surprising similarities. While medieval knights gathered in grand halls for their massive feasts, we meet at modern burger joints and backyard BBQs. Their 5-pound portions might seem extreme, but think about eating challenges at today's restaurants. Medieval cooks used salt and herbs from castle gardens, while we have access to countless seasonings from around the world. They cooked over carefully controlled fire pits. We use grills and flat-top griddles. But both eras share a love for quality meat, fresh ingredients, and the social aspect of sharing a meal. Medieval feasts were about showing status and building community, just like how today's burger culture brings people together, whether at a fancy restaurant or a casual cookout. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through medieval burger history. If you enjoyed learning about these massive feasts, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share with your friends who love history or burgers.